I pulled the kitchen cabinets off the wall and found mushrooms growing behind them. Not mold, actual mushrooms. That was the moment I realized my HOA wasn't just lazy. They were going to let the whole damn place rot. When I bought this condo, I really thought I was making the smart move. It wasn't flashy or new, no granite countertops or fancy wine fridge, but it was mine. After the divorce, I needed something quiet, stable, something I didn't have to rebuild from scratch emotionally and financially. This place checked all the boxes: ground floor, decent light, quiet neighbors who mostly kept to themselves. Close enough to the city for work, but far enough out that I could still breathe. I remember standing in the living room the day I signed, listening to the rain tapping on the roof. It sounded kind of soothing, like it was saying, "Yeah, man, you're good now. You're safe." And after everything I'd been through, moving out, sleeping on my buddy's couch, dividing furniture like it was wartime rations, safe sounded real good. I didn't even mind the HOA at first. You hear horror stories online, people measuring grass with rulers and slapping fines for having the wrong color curtains. But our HOA seemed tame. A few newsletters about picking up dog poop and not leaving trash cans out overnight, nothing crazy. Glenna, the president, sent those emails that were signed warmly but felt like they were typed with gritted teeth. Still, I figured if I paid my dues and kept my head down, I'd never hear from them. For the first year, that mostly held true. I worked from home, wrote boring software manuals for industrial equipment, and slowly pieced together some kind of life again. My weekends were quiet, coffee in the morning, maybe a run if my knees didn't act up, and the occasional poker night with guys from work. My sister Emily would call once in a while and bug me about dating again, but I had zero interest in Tinder trauma. Then came that one storm. Not even a big one, honestly, just heavy enough to make the lights flicker a bit to rattle the windows. I didn't think anything of it until a couple weeks later I noticed my kitchen cabinet, the one above the stove, looked like it was leaning away from the wall. Not a lot, just enough to bug me. I figured maybe a screw came loose, or maybe the drywall anchor shifted. I'd fix it on a Saturday, no big deal. But when I unscrewed it and pulled it away, that's when I saw it. The wall behind it was soft, like I pressed with my thumb and it left a dent. Then I saw the stain, dark, ugly, shaped like a splash, right in the corner where the wall met the ceiling. I got that cold gut feeling, the one you get when your car makes a sound you know means expensive. So I pulled more of the cabinets down, and behind the last one, near the vent, were these little pale brown mushrooms. Real ones. Growing right out of the wall like the place was trying to return to the forest. I just stood there for a second, trying to make sense of it. Like maybe my neighbor's doing some weird kitchen garden thing, or maybe I'm losing it. I literally said out loud, "What the hell is this?" Like I expected the mushrooms to answer. It wasn't just gross, it was terrifying. Because if there were mushrooms inside the wall, that meant moisture. And if there was moisture, that meant rot. And if there was rot, well, that meant trouble. I climbed up into the attic crawl space above my unit, and it hit me the second I got my head through the panel. That smell. Damp wood, mildew, something sharp and earthy that made the back of my throat itch. I shone a flashlight around and there it was, clear as day. A black water trail running along a beam, and right above it, the roof panel had a crack wide enough to fit my pinky through. So now I knew. It wasn't my walls. It wasn't my pipes. The damn roof was leaking. And you know what the worst part was? I wasn't even mad yet. I actually thought, this sucks, but it's fine. I'll call the HOA. They'll take care of it. That's what I pay for, right? So I did what any sane person would do. I emailed the HOA. Subject line, urgent maintenance request, active roof leak. I kept it polite, laid it all out, told them what I found, that I'd already been up in the crawl space and could see the water trail, mentioned the mushrooms, though I tried to phrase that part gently because, people get weird when you say the word fungus. I attached pictures and everything. I even offered to have a roofing company come out on my dime just to get a professional opinion. No reply. Not even a, "We got your email." A few days go by and I figure maybe they missed it. Maybe Glenna's out of town, so I follow up with another email. This time I CC'd the generic HOA maintenance address and the management company they use. Still nothing. Then a week later I get a letter in the mail. Not a call, not a knock, not an email. An actual printed letter, folded wrong so it stuck out of the envelope like it was trying to escape. I open it thinking, finally, here we go. It wasn't about the leak. It was a warning notice. Apparently, the satellite dish mounted on the back wall of my unit, a dish that's been there since I moved in and that doesn't even work anymore, was non-compliant with the community aesthetic and subject to removal within 15 days or a fine of $150 per violation. I swear I sat there and read it twice because I thought maybe I missed the part where it said, "P.S. about your roof. We'll send someone out." But no, just a neatly printed threat over a dead piece of hardware nobody can even see from the street. That's when I got the first real feeling in my gut that something was off. Not, they're busy or they'll get to it. No, this was different. Like they'd seen my email and instead of replying, decided to go digging for a way to slap me with something. Like I rattled the wrong cage. So I called the management company. Some guy named Travis answered. Nice enough voice, sounded like he could be in a barbershop quartet or sell you a car warranty. I asked him straight up if they'd received my maintenance request. "Oh yeah," he said. "We got it. I think the board's reviewing it." I asked him what that meant. Reviewing it. Like, were they getting someone out here? Did they have a timeline? Well, you know, it's a shared structure, so it has to be approved by the board as a common area repair. I said, "It is a common area repair. It's the roof." And he just went quiet for a second. Then he gave me that corporate shrug in phone call form. They'll be in touch. They weren't. Days go by. Then a full week. I send another email. This time I attach inspection quotes from not one, but 2 licensed roofing contractors. Both confirmed roof damage. One even marked it as urgent, with visible signs of water intrusion and potential structural risk. Silence. No call, no knock, no carrier pigeon. Just more silence, like I didn't exist. Until another letter came. This one said the dish had not been removed, and now I owed $150. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just neglect. This was a game, and I'd just made my opening move. At first, I tried to stay cool. I mean, it's a roof. You can't just not fix a roof, right? There's rules, insurance, liabilities. Surely someone, somewhere in the HOA food chain would realize how nuts it was to ignore it. I figured if I gave it time, they'd circle back. Maybe they were slow, maybe they were overwhelmed, maybe Glenna was stuck in a timeshare seminar in Boca or wherever she retreats to when she needs a recharge. But no, turns out they weren't circling back. They were digging in. Not long after the satellite dish fine, I came home to find a note taped to my door, not in an envelope, just scotch taped like a middle school breakup letter. It was another warning, this time for visible damage to the interior of the unit viewable from the common walkway. They were talking about the spot where the drywall had started to crumble from the moisture. Apparently, since my blinds had been open one afternoon, someone had walked by, peeked through, and decided the water-damaged wall was a community eyesore. Let me repeat that. I was being warned for having damage that they were refusing to fix. At that point, I started laughing. Like, genuinely laughed. Because you have to, right? If you don't laugh, you'll lose your damn mind. I even texted a picture of the letter to my sister Emily and added, "They're trolling me now, right? This is performance art?" She didn't laugh. She called. "Chris, you need to start documenting everything. Every letter, every email, every voicemail, every photo. Save it all. Don't delete a thing." Which is exactly what I did. I created a little folder on my desktop called Moldgate. Every new wrinkle went in there, because it was piling up fast. The smell got worse. The wall went from stained to warped. My kitchen started to feel like an old boat, humid, creaky, and slowly losing the battle. I stopped cooking at home. I couldn't stand to be in there for more than 5 minutes without getting a headache or a cough. It didn't even feel like my place anymore. I emailed the HOA again. I told them the mold was spreading. I told them about the cough, the headaches. I even told them I'd gotten a doctor's note recommending I stay out of the kitchen, that the mold spores could trigger respiratory issues. Their response? Nothing. Then came the kicker. A certified letter. Big envelope. Heavy, official looking. Inside was a notice that I was being investigated for failure to properly maintain the interior environment of the unit, which they claimed was creating a risk to neighboring properties. That's when I finally understood what was happening. They were flipping the script. They were trying to make me the problem. Like this whole mess wasn't about a leaky roof. It was about a negligent homeowner who let his place go to hell. Like I was some hoarder with garbage bags and raccoons living in my vents. And here's the thing, it started to work. Neighbors who used to smile in that vague suburban way stopped making eye contact. I'd walk by and feel people close their blinds. One guy, someone I'd said hello to for 2 years, actually crossed the parking lot to avoid walking past my door. I tried to talk to Glenna. I called, left a message, then another. No answer. I emailed again. This time with legal language Emily helped me draft. Still nothing. That's when Emily said it plainly. They're not going to fix it, Chris. They don't want to fix it, because they can't afford to. If they fix yours, they'll have to fix everyone's. They're hoping you'll give up, sell, go away quietly. And she was right, because later that week I got a call from a realtor I didn't contact. She said she'd heard my unit might be going on the market soon and wanted to offer a quiet sale to avoid further complications. Further complications. That was the moment the gloves came off. I knew then, this wasn't incompetence. This was strategy. I didn't want a war. I just wanted my damn roof fixed. That was the thought I kept coming back to over and over again, like some kind of personal mantra. Every time I sat down with another letter from the HOA or looked up at the ceiling to check if the stain had gotten bigger, spoiler, it always had, I told myself, don't escalate, just be reasonable. If you stay calm, play it by the book, someone reasonable will step in eventually, right? Right? So first, I reached out to the city, Department of Buildings. I talked to this guy who sounded like he'd been answering the same 5 phone calls for 20 years. I explained everything. The leak, the mold, the contractor's reports, the HOA stonewalling me. He cut me off halfway through and said, "Are you a tenant?" "No, I own the unit." Then he let out this slow, almost sympathetic exhale and said, "That makes it a civil matter. We don't mediate HOA disputes." I asked him about the mold, about health code stuff. He said, unless it was causing harm to someone outside my unit, there wasn't much they could do. Apparently, as long as I wasn't coughing blood into the common pool, I was on my own. Next, I called the county health department. Got passed around for a bit, then finally landed on a woman who at least sounded like she gave a damn. I explained everything again, and to her credit, she actually asked for the inspection reports. Said she'd look into it. For a couple days, I had hope. That ended with a short voicemail telling me the department had no enforcement authority over private condominium associations. She wished me luck. Okay, fine. So I tried the insurance route again. I got my agent on the phone, Melissa, who'd always been friendly when she was trying to sell me the policy. Not so much now. She basically repeated what I already knew. My policy only covered the interior. Roof's not your problem, Chris. It's the HOA's. And when I told her they were refusing to fix it, she went real quiet and said, "That's surprising." I asked if the company could go after them directly, maybe subrogate the claim. She said, "We could, but we'd need a paper trail showing they've acknowledged liability and refused repair." "Well," I said, "they requested the inspection report, then ignored it." "Yeah," she said, "that's not quite the same." She sounded more like she was trying not to get involved than trying to help, and when I pushed, she eventually just said, "Honestly, Chris, at this point, I'd recommend you pursue it with an attorney." There it was, the one word I'd been hoping to avoid. Lawyer. So I called one, or more accurately, Emily called one. She has contacts through her firm, mostly low-level associates, but one of them agreed to talk to me as a favor. His name was Aaron, and he had the kind of voice that made everything sound more serious than it probably was. He was actually pretty encouraging at first. Said it was clear-cut on paper. Roof equals HOA responsibility. Mold equals a byproduct of their negligence. If I had reports and documentation, he thought we had something. He even called it low-hanging fruit for a lawsuit. But then he dropped the part no one likes to hear. Unless you want to go straight to court and spend thousands up front, you have to go through HOA internal resolution protocol first, which in normal speak means writing a strongly worded letter and waiting for the board to pretend to care. So we wrote it. Emily helped draft it. Legal language, citations, all the right phrases. Failure to maintain common elements, constructive neglect, exposure to health hazards. We attached photos, inspection reports, a medical note from my doctor, and even a timeline of communications, or lack thereof. We sent it certified mail, twice, and we waited. 2 weeks later, I got a reply. It wasn't from Glenna, it was from the HOA's attorney, not a big firm, just some local name I didn't recognize. The letter said the HOA denies any liability, that no evidence of current structural failure has been verified by a third-party engineer retained by the association, and that I was encouraged to mitigate interior damage in accordance with the terms of my homeowner policy. They also threw in a line that said my public dissemination of accusatory language could be considered defamatory and actionable. So not only were they refusing to fix the leak, they were threatening to sue me if I kept talking about it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, or what was left of it, and just stared at the peeling corner of the wall above the stove. The paint had bubbled up like a blister, and if I listened closely, I swear I could hear it crackling. That wall had been white once. Now it looked like dried mustard. I didn't feel angry. Not exactly. I just felt hollow. Like I'd used up all my fuel. I was tired. Tired of being the reasonable one. tired of believing the process would work, tired of feeling like the more I tried to do the right thing, the deeper I sank into a swamp that everyone else seemed happy to ignore. For the first time, I really thought about giving up, just selling the place, taking the loss, walking away. But then, just as I was about to turn off the light and go to bed, I saw something out the window. Across the way on the edge of the property, there was a guy in coveralls pulling something out of a pickup, a big metal ladder. He was walking toward the next building over, where the roof had been patched up last summer. The HOA had fixed that one. That building had had a minor leak after a hailstorm, and they'd sent someone out within a week. I remembered because I'd seen the same guy back then, which meant someone had made a decision about whose roof was worth saving, and whose wasn't. And that's when something shifted in me. I wasn't done, not yet. So, I wasn't done. But I was close. I was still coughing every morning, my ceiling looked like a biology experiment, and the smell in my kitchen had officially entered "is that a dead animal" territory. Even Emily was starting to sound tired when I'd call her for advice. Not because she didn't care, she did, but because there's only so many ways you can say, "hang in there," before it starts to feel like a lie. Then came the twist. And the crazy part? It started with a Craigslist ad. No joke. I was looking for a cheap dehumidifier, something big enough to help with the moisture until I could figure out the next legal step. I didn't want to spend too much because, well, between the useless HOA, the useless insurance, and the maybe not so useless lawyer, I was already bleeding money. I found a used unit listed just a few blocks from me, some guy clearing out his dad's garage. The photos looked solid, price was decent, so I messaged him. We arranged a pickup. I figured I'd be in and out in 5 minutes. The guy turned out to be older, maybe late 60s. Name was Larry. Real quiet, wore those massive tinted glasses that make everyone look like they're on a witness protection program. He was nice, though. Helped me load the unit into the back of my car, and just as I was about to leave, he looked at me and said, "You're in Building 5, right?" I blinked. "Yeah, how'd you know?" "You're the roof guy." I just stood there like, what? He nodded. "Heard about your situation. A friend of mine's still on the maintenance committee, unofficially. Says they're trying to freeze you out." I told him that's what it felt like. Then he did this thing. He kind of looked around like he was checking for someone listening. I'm not kidding. He leaned in and said, "You know they covered up a structural report 2 years ago?" I asked him what he meant. He walked back into his garage, shuffled through a few boxes, and came out holding this thick blue folder. Dusty as hell. Handed it to me like it was contraband. I was on the board back then. They brought in a firm to do a full assessment after that hailstorm. Said it was just a precaution, but when the report came back, it showed signs of stress in the trusses over buildings 5 through 7. Water intrusion. They didn't like that. I opened the folder and flipped through. There were photos, diagrams, pages and pages of engineering speak. I didn't fully understand, but even I could pick out words like compromised, decay, and urgent remediation advised. "Why didn't they fix it?" I asked. Larry gave a tired little shrug. "Money. That tree incident last year blew the reserve fund. Glenna said we'd wait and reassess." Then I stepped down. Didn't like the direction things were heading. I couldn't even speak for a second. I just stared at the pages. Because here it was. Everything I needed. Proof. Proof they knew about the leak before I ever sent a single email. Proof they'd ignored it. That they'd made a deliberate choice not to act, not just out of laziness, but out of financial desperation. And they'd lied about it. Buried it. And now they were trying to pin the whole mess on me. Larry must have seen the look on my face because he said, "You didn't get that from me." I nodded. "Of course." But I got back in my car, folder on the passenger seat like it was made of gold, and I swear to God, I couldn't stop shaking. Not from anger, not from nerves, from adrenaline. Because for the first time in months, I wasn't cornered anymore. I had them. Driving home with that folder next to me felt like holding the key to the entire kingdom. Or maybe the grenade. I parked, took it inside like I was sneaking in contraband, and dropped it on my kitchen table, the same table where mold had started curling the edge of a placemat. I didn't even take off my jacket, just stood over the folder, flipping page after page, heart racing, brain already 5 steps ahead. Because I knew what I had wasn't just paperwork. It was a time bomb with Glenna's name stamped all over it. I called Emily. "Tell me you didn't just buy a dehumidifier from a guy who also sold you illegal documents." "I didn't pay for it," I said, "and it's not illegal. It's just very, very inconvenient for the HOA. I gave her the gist, read some of the report, told her about the engineering firm, the photos, the ignored recommendations. She got quiet on the other end of the line, but not the bad kind of quiet. the thinking kind. Then she said, "If they didn't disclose this to residents and the problem worsened, especially if they retaliated against you for pointing it out, that's not just bad management. That's exposure." "Legal exposure?" I asked. "Big time." The next couple days were a blur. Emily looped in one of the litigation guys from her firm just to get a second opinion. He wasn't technically supposed to be giving legal advice to non-clients, so everything was hypothetical. If a client had this, if a board had done that. But even with all the legal hedging, it was obvious the HOA had known. They documented the issue, buried the report, and let the damage get worse. And they sure as hell hadn't informed the residents. So we built the case. I spent hours scanning every page of that report, cross-referencing it with my inspection photos, lining them up side by side like it was some CSI scene. I dug out every email, every letter, every ignored request and snide response, and slapped them into a timeline. I even found the newsletter from that year, the one that claimed the hailstorm hadn't caused any damage requiring structural repair, which was a straight-up lie now that I had the engineering report. Meanwhile, Emily reached out to a contact at a small local news blog. Nothing major, just one of those community outlets that writes about potholes and bake sales. But it was a start. She sent a redacted version of the report and some photos. The editor's reply came within hours. He was very interested. And then came the piece I hadn't even thought about. Victor. Victor Lopez ran a roofing and restoration company just outside town. I'd seen his card before, pinned to the bulletin board in the laundromat back when people still did that. A neighbor mentioned him when I first moved in. Turns out he'd put in a bid for roof repairs after that same storm. He was one of the companies Glenna ignored. Emily managed to get him on the phone, and wouldn't you know it, he remembered the HOA, remembered bidding, remembered being told in no uncertain terms that there were no active leaks and they were just gathering quotes for budget purposes. He also remembered finding signs of rot above 3 buildings, including mine. We asked if he still had the proposal he submitted. He did. And guess who signed off on the receipt of that proposal? Glenna herself. So now we had more than just a buried engineering report. We had 2 professional evaluations showing active damage, both ignored by the board. One from inside, one from out. At some point, Emily just said it out loud. "You're not just getting your roof fixed. You might blow this whole thing open." But I wasn't interested in vengeance. Not really. I just wanted it on record. I wanted them to admit it, to stop pretending like I was crazy or dramatic or making it up. I wanted every neighbor who looked at me like a ticking time bomb to know it wasn't my fuse that was burning. It was Glenna's. So we built the plan. Emily helped draft a final letter. Not to the HOA board. We were done with them. We sent it directly to the HOA's legal counsel. It was sharp, clean. Every claim backed by documentation. It gave them 10 business days to respond before we would file a formal complaint with the state's Department of Consumer Affairs, notify the Department of Public Health, and, most importantly, forward the entire case to the local news outlet, who now had a journalist very ready to run the story. And just for good measure, we blind copied the letter to a few members of the HOA's board who weren't part of the executive group, people who maybe didn't know what Glenna had swept under the rug. 10 days. That was the clock. All I had to do now was wait, and maybe buy some popcorn. The funny thing about giving someone 10 days to respond is that you start imagining how they'll use them. You picture long boardroom meetings, quiet moments of panic, whispered calls between HOA members wondering how deep this rabbit hole goes. I imagined Glenna staring at that folder like it was radioactive. What I didn't expect was silence. Again, no email, no letter, not even a passive-aggressive sticky note on my door. Just nothing. At first, I thought maybe they were scrambling. Maybe their lawyer was trying to figure out how to keep them out of court without setting themselves on fire. But then, on day 4, exactly 4 days after the deadline started ticking, I got a knock on the door. I opened it, and standing there in a polo shirt embroidered with the HOA's logo was Travis, the management guy, the one with the voice that always sounded like it should be selling a mattress over the radio. He smiled like we were old friends meeting for brunch. "Hey there, Chris," he said. "Just checking in. Thought I'd stop by and see how things are going." I stared at him. "You mean the roof you still haven't fixed? Or the part where your board tried to pin a mold problem on me?" The smile barely faltered, just dipped a little at the edges. "Well, there's been some concern raised about recent communications you've made to board members, particularly regarding documents that may or may not have been obtained without proper authorization." There it was, the counterattack. I invited him in, not to be polite, I just didn't want to have that conversation in the hallway where every twitchy neighbor could peek through their blinds and start crafting a new gossip email chain. We sat at the same kitchen table that still smelled faintly of bleach and rot. Travis didn't even glance at the warped paint on the wall. He pulled out a manila folder. Real casual. "We'd like to propose a mediation," he said. "A quiet resolution. No public filings. The board is open to evaluating your claims internally, provided there's no escalation to outside entities. There's concern that going public would cause unnecessary panic among the residents." I leaned back, arms crossed. Panic about what? That the HOA let structural damage rot over our heads while they were busy sending out warnings about trash can placement. He gave this practiced chuckle. "Look, we understand your frustration, but what's important is moving forward. We can't undo the past, but we can work on a path that doesn't involve litigation or media attention. That helps no one." I knew what this was. It wasn't a peace offering. It was a trap. Because I also noticed what wasn't in that folder of his. No repair plan, no timeline, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Just a few vague bullet points about mutual agreement and non-disclosure. They were trying to shut me up, make me feel like I'd won something so I'd put the grenade back in the drawer. But they didn't understand one thing. I hadn't started this to win. I started it to stop losing. I thanked him for his time. Told him I'd think about it. Then I called Emily. She didn't even hesitate. They're fishing. They're trying to get ahead of the story now that they know it's real. Mediation with a confidentiality clause is how they bury this forever. It's how Glenna keeps her little fiefdom intact. And then, as if they knew I was onto them, the gloves came off completely. The next morning, I woke up to an envelope taped to my door. Violation notice. This one was about improper storage of personal property visible from the exterior. Translation? My recycling bin had been out an extra night because I'd fallen asleep on the couch after answering 30 emails from a local journalist who was now chasing the HOA story like a dog after a mail truck. The fine? $200. The next day, another notice. Non-approved window treatment in the guest bedroom. It was a curtain I'd had up since I moved in. They'd never said a word before. Suddenly it was non-compliant with visual guidelines. The day after that, I got an email from the HOA's attorney stating that I was creating an antagonistic environment and that further intimidating or harassing communication toward board members would result in legal action. They were trying to bury me under paper cuts. I almost laughed, because by then I was beyond scared. I was done playing by their rules. They'd had every chance to fix the problem. They'd had months. And now, just because I had the nerve to hold up a mirror, they wanted to shred me into submission with fines and veiled threats. So I pulled the pin, sent the full report to the journalist, sent copies to every resident in my building, slipped them under doors, highlighted the part where it said urgent remediation advised within 6 months. That 6 months? Already passed. I even posted it anonymously in the neighborhood Facebook group, along with photos of the mold, the ceiling stain, the mushrooms from that first horrifying day. And then, cherry on top, I called Victor Lopez, the roofing contractor, and asked him if he'd be willing to go on record about his bid being ignored. His response? Absolutely. They made me look like a liar when I told people that roof was unsafe. I'd love to set the record straight. The HOA wanted a war? They were going to get one. But this time, I wasn't the guy begging for help. I was the guy lighting the match. It started with a blog post. Just a small one. Barely 800 words. Tucked away on a local community news site that usually ran stories about farmers markets and middle school talent shows. But this time, the headline was a little different. HOA neglect leaves condo owner living in moldy nightmare. Documents reveal known roof issues were ignored. I saw it go live in the morning. No fanfare, no all caps outrage. Just the truth, laid out plain as day. Photos of the mushrooms, scans of the structural report, a redacted version of Victor's rejected bid. A little quote from me, anonymous at first, saying that I had spent months trying to get help and had been met with silence, fines, and threats. It spread faster than I thought. At first, it was just a couple comments. Then it got shared to a bigger local Reddit thread. Then someone on Nextdoor posted it, tagging the complex by name, asking if anyone else is dealing with this nonsense. That's when things started to snowball. A neighbor knocked on my door. Not to glare, not to gossip, to talk. She was in Building 7. She said she'd had a ceiling stain in her bathroom for over a year. HOA told her it was condensation. Her husband had patched it with painter's tape. She looked almost embarrassed, like she was ashamed for believing them. Then came a guy from Building 6, said he'd been fined twice for unauthorized roofing materials after installing a cheap tarp over a leaking patio corner. No one told him the roof itself might have been the issue. They were trickling in, one by one. A week later, the blog ran a follow-up, this time with names, mine included. I'd decided, screw it. They'd already tried to wreck my reputation. Might as well put my face to the fight. I told them everything. The letters, the violations, the intimidation. How Glenna tried to wrap the whole thing in silence and duct tape. And then Victor gave his interview, on record, named dates, people, proposals. Said plainly that his company had flagged the issues years ago and was told, quote, "There's no money for non-priority projects." That same week, Emily called me, practically breathless. She'd gotten a call from the Department of Consumer Affairs. Someone up the chain had seen the blog post and flagged it. Said they wanted to open an inquiry. Nothing official yet, but the wheels were turning. And then, as if the universe was just teeing it up, Glenna made a mistake. She sent an all-residents email, one of those long, wordy things she's famous for, trying to sound like a lawyer and a kindergarten teacher at the same time. It was supposed to be damage control. She called the blog post inflammatory and said it was based on selectively edited documents and disgruntled individuals with personal grievances. But then she wrote a sentence that changed everything. As previously stated, the 2021 structural report was determined to be non-actionable. That was a problem, because no one had previously stated the report existed, and now she'd admitted in writing to both knowing about it and deciding not to act. I forwarded that email to the journalist. He nearly lost his mind. It was the digital equivalent of watching someone hand you a confession and ask you to proofread it. By the end of the week, a bigger outlet picked up the story, an actual Metro paper. Real journalists, real editors, real lawyers reviewing every word. They ran it under a simple, brutal headline: leaking roof, rising mold, and a silent HOA when the people in charge don't protect you. There was a photo of my kitchen ceiling, curled and yellowed like a dead leaf, a side-by-side of the engineering report and Glenna's email, quotes from residents, not just me, saying they were misled, ignored, afraid to speak up. One anonymous board member even confessed off the record that Glenna had insisted on controlling the message and avoiding panic. Panic arrived anyway. At the next HOA meeting, which was normally attended by maybe 5 board retirees and a guy looking for donuts, the community room was packed. People were standing against the walls. Some brought printed copies of the article. A few brought photos of their own water damage. And when Glenna tried to open the meeting with her usual calm, brittle smile, someone in the back said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Why are you still up there?" It rippled. A few people clapped. A woman near the front stood up and said, "You lied to us. About the roof, about the money, about everything." Glenna tried to gavel her down. Didn't work. The room turned on her like a switch had flipped. Someone demanded a vote of no confidence. Someone else brought up an emergency clause in the bylaws about removal of board officers. It was chaos. Beautiful, delicious chaos. And for once, none of it was aimed at me. I just sat near the back, quiet, watching it all happen. They didn't need me to fight anymore. They'd picked up the sword themselves. The kitchen's quiet now, no fans buzzing. No air purifier humming in the corner. No dripping sounds or squishy drywall under my fingertips. Just the tick of the clock above the stove and the low gurgle of the coffee maker doing its thing. Peaceful. In that way, you only appreciate after months of feeling like the walls were closing in on you. Literally, in my case. The ceiling's fixed. Fresh paint. Clean lines. New cabinets I picked out myself. No HOA permission slip required. The guy who did the repairs even complimented the flooring, said he could tell I took care of the place. That meant more than I expected it to. I still live here, believe it or not. I thought about moving. I really did. For a while, I couldn't look at this place without remembering the mold and the headaches and the stress. But after everything, after the fight, the press, the meetings, the vote, the hearings, it feels different now, like it's mine again. Glenna's gone. She resigned to focus on family, which is HOA speak for left before she could get booted. The board's been completely reshuffled. Victor ended up joining, which still makes me smile. A guy who actually knows what shingles are made of, running a place that used to fine people for having the wrong shade of beige curtains. There was an audit, of course there was. Turns out the reserve fund wasn't just drained, it had been mismanaged for years. No fraud, technically, just plain old negligence dressed up in spreadsheets. Some dues went up temporarily to fix the budget mess, but no one seemed to mind anymore. Transparency has a way of softening the blow, and people started talking to each other again. It's weird. This little war, and yeah, that's what it was, it actually pulled the community together, Neighbors I didn't even know a year ago now say hi when we pass. One of them even invited me to a barbecue. I didn't go, still easing into the whole social after HOA scandal thing, but I appreciated the invite. Emily says the whole saga should have broken me. I think in a way it broke open something instead. I used to avoid conflict like the plague. Stay quiet, go along, keep the peace. And for what? So someone else could steamroll me in the name of community harmony? Now I speak up, not just here, everywhere. I question things more. I read the fine print, and I'm not scared to push back when something smells off, or when it smells like mold. Sometimes I still think about the mushrooms, that ridiculous little clump I found behind the cabinets. The moment it all started. I've got a picture of them saved on my phone, not as some trauma thing, but as a reminder. Because those mushrooms, they weren't the enemy. They were just the first ones honest enough to say, hey, something's rotting in here. So yeah, things are good now, quiet, steady. I even hung a little magnet on the fridge last week. My sister gave it to me as a joke. It says, home is where the mold isn't. Damn right.